Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good afternoon and good morning to all of you joining us here in person and online, depending on your time zone. Thank you so much again for your patience. We got actually delayed quite a bit due to the rain outside and received requests to give you the participants who were not able to be here some time. As indicated in the program, we are here to discuss on strengthening Africa-led conflict prevention and resolution, seizing the unique opportunity the upcoming Luanda summit avails us. As you know, one of the key outcomes of the 39 AU summit was the decision to have an extraordinary summit of heads of state and government of the African Union on strengthening mechanisms for conflict prevention and resolution in Africa. This high-level dialogue is brought to you by Nonviolent Peaceforce, Amani Africa, and FAS-AU Cooperation Office. We will start the session with the welcoming and opening remarks from Amani Africa, and for that we have Mr. Fasit Hailu. Mr. Fasit, you have the floor, please. Thank you so much. Let's welcome her with a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Rubet. Welcome, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues, and friends. Thank you for agreeing to join us here. In just 6 weeks, Luanda will host an extraordinary summit that African heads of state and government themselves called for. The upcoming extraordinary summit is being convened because member states acknowledge that Africa's peace and security landscape has reached a critical moment. They recognize that the continent needs an honest conversation, one that confronts difficult realities and asks whether our existing approaches remain fit for purpose. We all can agree that these realities are impossible to ignore. Across the continent, violent conflicts are becoming more protracted, more complex, and more interconnected. From Sudan to the Eastern DRC, from Sahel to parts of the Horn of Africa, millions of Africans continue to bear the devastating human cost of war and insecurity. Armed groups are becoming more sophisticated. Climate-related pressures are intensifying competition and displacement. Civilians are increasingly being targeted. And in addition to these threats, external geopolitical rivalries are adding new layers of complexity to the African conflicts. Taken together, these challenges are testing not only the resilience of our societies, but also the effectiveness of the African peace and security architecture itself. It was in recognition of these realities that the Assembly, in its February decision, called for a frank and forward-looking discussion on the future of APSA. The message was clear. This is not a moment for business as usual. It's a moment for reflection, for honesty, for a candid conversation. Above all, it's a moment for action. That's the opportunity that we have before us today. Our dialogue is intended to contribute to that continental conversation, to examine where APSA has delivered, where it has fallen short, and what reforms are necessary to restore the African Union's agency in preventing, managing, and resolving conflicts. The ideas generated in this room can help inform the discussion that will take place in Luanda by the end of August this year. And it will also contribute to a stronger, more effective African peace and security architecture. So today, I want to draw your attention to the main question this dialogue has been convened to answer. Why has AU conflict prevention and resolution underperformed? Since last year, Amani Africa has been convening policy forums and expert policy dialogue to get answers to identify where the gaps exist and why they exist. So to start off our dialogue, I want to speak on the 4 problems that we have identified when designing the concept of this dialogue. The first is, as you have seen in the concept note, the crisis of leadership. This is not a claim that our leaders lack capacity. It's a claim about initiative, taking initiative on our existing problems. Time and again, the instrument is available to the AU Commission, to member states, and also to the regional economic communities, go unused, not because they are unavailable, but because no one moves first. If we look into the existing instruments, there are many low-cost, low political risk actions that sit within reach at any given moment, such as convening the fragmented mediation and stabilization initiatives already operating in a crisis region so they stop working past one another. Another example that can be used is a commission mission to a capital that has not seen senior AU leadership in years, at a moment when the political conditions for such a visit have never been better. None of this requires a new mandate, a new treaty, or a new money. It requires someone deciding to act based on the existing mandates. The second is the political will deficit. And here, we heard a pushback from experts on how we usually talk about it. We treat political will as though it were whether something we wait for or something that either arrives or doesn't. And when it doesn't, we treat its absence as an explanation in itself. This perception is highly resisted by most experts. Political will should be generated, deliberately and continuously by leadership prepared to spend political capital on it. So that raises another question this dialogue has to answer. How do we create the conditions for political will and leadership? I don't think there is one answer because the conditions look different at each level. At the level of member states, at the AU Commission, at the level of the Peace and Security Council. So we're going to explore those opportunities that we have at hand. The third is structural under-resourcing, which brings me to a question this dialogue is also expected to answer. How do we close the financing gap? I want to be specific about the shape of the problem, because it's not simply that prevention is underfunded. It's that we have let our ambitions outrun our means in the wrong direction, and that the little financing we do mobilize rarely reaches the level where I would argue most prevention actually happens. When the overwhelming majority of our peace and security financing originates outside of the continent, we cannot simultaneously claim full African agency over the outcomes. That points us to a hard but necessary question for this room. Should the African Union keep aspiring to mount large multidimensional peace operations it cannot sustainably finance, or should it deliberately concentrate its own resource where it holds a genuine comparative advantage? Preventive diplomacy, mediation, and sustainable political accompaniment. The fourth constraint receives the least attention of all, and it points us directly to a question I want this dialogue to sit with rather than pass over quickly. Who is actually doing prevention, and are we even looking in the right place? Our prevention architecture, as currently designed, is built almost entirely for state and institutional actors. Local peace communities negotiate access and civilian protection where no formal mechanism exists. Traditional authorities and religious leaders mediate intercommunal tensions long before they even reach the threshold of AU attention. Women's networks monitor protection risks and hold social cohesion together under active violence. None of that is visible to the continental early warning system. None of it is built into the African peace and security architecture's institutional design. And this is not only a design gap, it shows up operationally. Community and civil society voices are still too often kept at arm's length from the very council whose decisions affect them most directly. The 4 constraints explain why prevention underperforms. But I want to add one observation, which is also admitted in President Ruto's report that was submitted to the February summit, which is about implementation. I think it cuts across all the 4 constraints. This constraint has not, in fact, been short of norms, institutions, or decisions. The Peace and Security Council alone produces communiques on almost everything before it. What we have consistently failed to build is implementation architecture to match the systems that carry a decision from adoption through to results on the ground. We see a dissonance between what's being decided in the Peace and Security Council and what's on the ground, and the people suffering being extended from time to time. Although we have, in effect, a very well-built decision-making infrastructure sitting on top of a much thinner implementation architecture. We can talk about the panel of the wise as one illustration. By any empirical measure, it has been active. Dozens of missions across every region of this continent in recent years. But activity is not the same as effectiveness. Panels being deployed, they report back, and too often the follow-up simply stops. No consistent mechanism ties their recommendations back into decision-making. No sustained relationship links the panel, the Peace and Security Council, and the chairperson of the Commission closely enough to keep momentum alive after the mission ends. That is just one example, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more examples based on the existing mechanisms that we have. So in answering what concrete commitments should emerge from the extraordinary summit, I would ask us to resist the pull towards resisting principles we already agree on, such as the principle of non-indifference, African solution to African problems, the primacy of prevention. These are not in dispute, and a summit that simply reaffirms them will change nothing. What we would ask this room to produce instead are commitments specific enough to be checked a year from now. If we leave Luanda with commitments no one can verify a year from now, that will be a failure again. We will have had this same conversation again in 5 years. Taken together, these are the 5 questions I hope will anchor our discussion this afternoon. Why prevention has underperformed, who is actually doing it, and whether we are even looking in the right place, how we built the conditions for political will and leadership at every level, from member states to the council, then to the commission, to regional economic communities as well. What the summit should concretely, verifiably commit to, and how we close a financing gap that runs from the continental level down to the community level. With that, I thank Amani Africa partners, the Nonviolent Peaceforce, and Frederick Ebert Stiftung for making this conversation possible. Thank you, each of you, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tefisit. Now we will move on to the main session, and it will be moderated by Ms. Leslie Conley, Regional Policy Advocacy Manager at Nonviolent Peaceforce. Yes, you have the floor, please, and thank you so much. Let's welcome her with a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Rubaiyat, and thank you everyone for joining us here today for this high-level dialogue. Thank you to Amani Africa, to FES AU Cooperation Office for the partnership, and for all of you joining us both here in person and online. I don't think I have much more to reiterate except to invite our panelists up today for this very interesting discussion. I think that I have nothing really to add to what has been shared by our opening remarks, but just to reiterate that we really do have a rare moment right now. It's broadly been recognized. We have a conflict prevention crisis on the continent, and we have an implementation crisis. The institution has the tools, it has the mechanisms. Some of them have been referred to, the panel of the wise, the continental early warning response mechanisms, the Peace and Security Council, but the implementation and the action is the gap. The questions have been outlined, and I really want to reiterate for our panelists and for our audience that we're looking for concrete solutions. We don't want to rehash the challenges. We don't want to rehash common phrases, but we want to look at how do we really try and push the AU to think out of the box, to think about using the mechanisms, and think about who else is doing prevention. That's where Nonviolent Peaceforce really focuses, at the community level. Communities are not waiting for peace. They are pursuing peace. They are de-escalating conflict situations. They are preventing conflict. How do we create the bridge? And that's why we have such a rich panel today with speakers from a member state perspective, regional perspective, community perspective, and the policy environment. So let me briefly introduce and invite the speakers up. How we're going to do it today is just try and have as much of an informal discussion as we can with our panelists giving 7 to 10 minute interventions, and we'll then open it up for questions and comments from the floor and from those of you online. Our first speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Domingo Paulo, who is the Defense Attaché at the Permanent Mission of Angola to the African Union. Lieutenant Colonel, if you'd like to join us up here. Lieutenant Colonel has vast experience, having served in the Angolan Armed Forces and within the Angolan Defense Diplomacy, including previously as the Assistant Attaché and Military Advisor at Angola's UN mission, and now based here in Addis. He will set the scenes for us by reflecting on Angola's priorities and why conflict prevention is such a focus. Thank you. Our second speaker is Ambassador Javen Pili Ponsami, who is the permanent representative of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, here in Addis. He's previously served as the SADC Senior Liaison Officer to the AU before being appointed as the PR. And I think that this is a really interesting opportunity to hear from other mechanisms at the regional level. We often forget about the REX, and I think that this is a good way to talk about what complementarity means in person. Welcome, Ambassador. Our third speaker is now shifting us to look again at who else is doing prevention. My colleague, Mr. Chris Obgona from Nonviolent Peaceforce's Sudan program. Chris is the head of programs based in Tawila in Darfur, and he's really joining us to talk about those that he works with every day that are preventing conflict in the absence of a lot of the institutional mechanisms there. Chris, thank you. And lastly, we have Ms. Mahalet Hagos from the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes. Ms. Hagos has had various previous roles in Addis, including at the British Embassy and GIZ. And she's really going to be almost responding to a lot of what we're hearing today from the policy perspective, drawing off Accord's vast experience in the peace and security space. Welcome and thank you. So again, I hope that we can try and keep to time, noting we did start a bit late today and that we want to really have a robust discussion, but to really remind our participants that we're trying to bring new and innovative ideas, solutions, and recommendations that we can take forward to the summit today. So I'm going to pass it now over to Lieutenant Colonel for the first question, to really look at this from the perspective of Angola. As the host of the Extraordinary Summit, what do you hope that the summit will achieve, and what would constitute success from your perspective? So over to you, Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. I'm here on behalf of our ambassador, Professor Miguel Cesar Domingos Bembe, which is out of the country for other commitments. So what we expect from Angola Extraordinary Summit is, I think, is a very unique opportunity for us to reinforce the legal instruments that we have to conflict resolutions. And we put the bar a bit high to engage our head of states and governments to rethink and reinforce the ways to solve conflicts in Africa. I think is a unique opportunity that we have to deal with the conflict crisis in Africa. Instead of being reactive, I think African Union and all African states, they need to be more proactive to avoid any type of conflict without doing nothing, instead of waiting and then react very late.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. I wonder if perhaps before I pass over to Ambassador, you could share a bit more on why Angola has decided to champion this issue, and what's really driving this focus. Why now, and where do you hope to go from here?
So, as you know, our experience shows how we handled our conflict. So our president, João Gonçalves Lourenço, recently he led the peace talk for DRC process, Eastern DRC. Last year we had a meeting in New York to revitalize the conflict resolutions, and on that time we were leading the Peace Security Council, and this is like a follow up for this, and also President Lourenço is the African Union champion for peace and reconciliation in Africa. So there is a lot of things that he needs to do, and that's why he's calling the head of states to join the country for this summit. Let me read a bit just to have an idea what I'm talking about. We have seen problems in Sahel. We have seen problems in DRC. We have seen problems in Sudan. So instead of looking the way we're gonna act or react, we need be more proactive. That's why our president is leading this initiative, just to show that we are capable to solve our own problems. But we need to come together, not alone, but we need to come together, joining forces to move on and trying to solve the conflict problems that Africa is facing. So basically is what I want to share with you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. I think it's extremely interesting to understand the continuation of this agenda, starting it, as you said, in conversations in New York, and now bringing it and bridging that gap to allow the continent to come together and really discuss how the AU can almost reclaim its role as resolving and responding to conflict on the continent. So a very unique opportunity, as you had mentioned, and I think very trying examples of Sahel, of DRC, of Sudan that you raised that are really pushing the multilateral institutions to think about how it can engage. And that's where other actors become involved. And I think that, personally speaking, we often forget the regional economic communities when we're talking about conflict prevention. We remember the standby forces. We think of them in peace support operations. But how are the regional mechanisms responding to and reacting in the space of conflict prevention, diplomacy, and mediation? And so, Ambassador, I would love to turn to you now to hear your reflections on where are the regional economic communities in these conversations, and how can we strengthen that link with the African Union? And in your opinion, how can the African Union, what can it do to play a stronger conflict prevention role?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Javin. I'm the SADC permanent representative at the African Union. So first of all, let me start by thanking all of you for this event. I came back from Malawi from a ministerial committee of the organ of SADC on peace and security and governance. So I had to make it happen because I rely a lot on those partners here to get information, same as I'm seeing that they rely on me as well to get information. So first of all, let me say I'm very proud to be with Angola here, because Angola is our member state. It's also the Central African member state, but it's an example in our region, whether it is the champion, whether it has been the mediator in Eastern DRC, where I'll speak about that a bit later on, or the biennial. So it has been giving a lot of impetus to this issue of mediation and conflict resolution. And I cannot thank my member state enough. I'm not here to answer to all the questions you put to me. How can we solve the issues of the African Union? I will try to contribute to this. I'll present in 3 subsectors. For those who don't know what SADC is doing on the conflict prevention side, I'll give you some overbriefs. And then I'll come also on the relations that we have with the African Union, the collaboration that we have, the normative framework, quickly, and then some proposals, but I'll give that later on at the end of the conversation. So for those who don't really know what us RECs, we have 8 recognized RECs on the continent. We are guided by what our blueprint is the RISDIP, the Regional Indicative Strategic Plan. Every 10 years we review this, and it guides us on everything, whether it's agriculture, peace and security. Peace and security is our foundation 0 pillar. Is the most important things. It tells us exactly where we need to reach before 2030. And I'm going to give some examples of what we have in place already. But this RISDIP is also guided by the SADC Vision 2050, which is, of course, similar to the Agenda 2063 of the continent. We are all RECs, we are same member states, so we have to work together towards continental integration. So let me start with early warning. We have our regional early warning centers connected to our national early warning centers. So they pick up information, help us to monitor, mediate, and mitigate political or security threats in our region. I'll come to the problems we are having. We have the continental early warning centers, but they seem to be working in silos. I know there's collaboration a lot between SADC and EU on this, but me being here for 7 past years, I'm really privy to search information, what is being shared between our centers and the EU. And even though I'm here, I'm supposed to be informed. I'm not talking about the general public. So I hope they're working together. Ours is based at the Secretariat in Gaborone. If we come to our preventive diplomacy and mediation, You must know that we also have a similar mechanism, the panel of elders of SADC. COMESA has one. Eastern African Standby Force has one as well. But we seem to be working in silos. So there have been repeated requests to have regular interaction between the panel of the WISE of the African Union, the FemWISE, the WISE Youth, and similar organs within the REX. But it has happened in the past, but I wish it will happen more so that they can exchange on information. I'm coming to Madagascar, for example, what we are doing with our POE. We have the Mediation Reference Group, which is our panel of elders. Actually, I was with the chair of the Mediation Reference Group, a former general of South African Army who has been in the liberation movements. Stories and how his knowledge and expertise can really push our POEs in working. This is our Article 7 of the Protocol of SADC, which also created the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation. This is our body which monitors governance, peace, and security in the region among our 16 member states. It's nothing new to you because you are based in one of the member states, but I'm just quickly going over this for those who don't understand, who don't know really. So we have a shuttle diplomacy, for example. We have done that in Lesotho. Madagascar right now is happening, where our POE is leading a mission. We do confidence building, capacity building. We have our electoral governance and conflict management. So our guidelines are clear. We do election observation missions in our member states through our SADC Defense Pact, which binds us all. We have women, peace and security. We are really ahead on implementing Resolution 1325. We have created the network of women in mediation. We are empowering them to be part of our mediation horizon. We have also the ASF side, the African Standby Force side. So us at SADC, we have the SADC Standby Force. We'll come on that. We were having a quick discussion on this earlier before, but we have deployed before, and we have seen problems. So we have knocked on the door of AU under the principle of complementarity. But still there's work to be done there. So SAPMIL in Lesotho, early prevention. We have done in Mozambique, SAMIM. Recently we were in DRC, SAMI DRC, but we withdrew. We chose on going towards mediation, the purpose of this forum today. Interaction quickly. We work through different protocols. We have the 2008 MOU on peace and security, which guide the work of SADC and, all the REX and EU. We have the 2020 revised protocol. If any of you want these documents, I can easily share them with you. You better understand the relations. What is EU supposed to be doing? What are the REX? We have the AGAPSA platform. But the most important thing before I finish quickly here is the division of labor. The division of labor, people don't seem to know about it. It's an exercise which has been ongoing for the past 9 years. The division of labor document tells you exactly what the African Union does, what the REX do, and what the member states do. The political peace and security has been validated since 2021, not implemented. What we are seeing on the ground right now is unofficial implementation of what should have been official implementation. I'm going to come to the SADC EAC AU on DRC, Madagascar and AU. So these things is division of labor document that I think that would be the core proposal I'll be making, that implementation has to happen. We don't know exactly where we stand, no duplication of work, no parallel efforts like ICGLR working on the Luanda process together with Angola. Then you have EAC deploying its forces in Eastern DRC, following which SADC deployed. It's a lot of financial problems. Then you have AU coming in through the mediator. So now, for the first time, we are having meetings under the Togo, who replaced our former president of Angola. Togo, SADC, EAC, and AU, we are working together, and we are having a meeting next week in Gaborone. It's called the Independent Joint Secretariat. I'll end up here.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador. I think it's what you've shared is such a rich overview of the regional conflict prevention mechanism from the SADC side. And it's one, as I said, we often forget. Yet it is, when we think about implementation of a lot of the mandates and decisions of the AU, it is the RECs that are closer to the context, that are able to respond more immediately, and who have a unique leverage over different situations being from the region. So I think it's a really interesting recommendation, as you said, is that it's implementation. That's the core of, I think, this conversation so far. We need to be implementing, practice what we preach, but at the same time, not replicate, not to ensure that we are coherent and we complement one another. And I think this is a great segue to turn to my colleague, Chris, to talk about how can we, when we talk about coherence and complementarity and we talk about conflict prevention structures, where are the communities within this? We know that in a lot of the conflicts on the continent, the institutional structures are not able to respond at the pace that's needed, and that there's a lot of work happening at track 3. We're not saying track 1 is not needed, but we're saying that there's a gap that's too large between community level work and the institutional structures. So I turn it over to you to share a bit from your perspective around who is doing conflict prevention, and how do we create more bridges between the community level, the regional structures, and the continental structures?
All right, thank you very much. I'm happy to have this opportunity to share the work that Nonviolent Peaceforce does on ground in also amplifying other voices of protection and prevention that we have. We're happy that a lot is done at different levels, the AU at the regional level, and this is great. But we must also acknowledge the fact that it comes with challenges, especially also that of time and that of the response gap that we have. We have extracted this conversation and realized that across the continent, we spoke about Sudan, DRC, other contexts, South Sudan, would realize that most of the conflict that we see that we are experiencing could actually have been prevented, or at least the magnitude of that would have been prevented if we are able to link local prevention measures to, of course, the other continental regional issues. I will speak about Sudan in this context because I work in Sudan. I stay in North Darfur, particularly in Tawila, so I can speak from the local context and from what we see on ground and how Nonviolent Peaceforce across its areas of operation have been supporting local structures. We have seen, for those of us that know about Sudan, we saw serious conflicts that resulted in mass atrocity that could have been prevented. We could talk about the El Janina conflict that happened in 2023, conversations about issues happening in South Kordofan. You talk about Diling, you talk about Kadugli, those areas are under siege, and we know what's going to happen is impending. And on the front burner still in Sudan is a conversation about El Obeid and what is happening and what can be prevented from happening. So we talk about these different layers of conflict, but with all of this comes issues of displacement. And we have localities, states that have been receiving mass influx of people. And with this influx comes pressure on resources, land, water, farming areas, grazing areas, health facilities, education, and even humanitarian aid that we talk about. All of this puts pressure, and these are also potential drivers for conflict. But beyond all of this, there are also other historical conflict drivers that we have seen over time. Particularly in the case of Sudan, you have issues around seasonal movement of cattle. These have always been serious conflict drivers. You have also unclear land arrangement. You have weak information systems. And we also have unresolved grievances that create conditions for these smaller disputes to spiral into bigger wars and conflicts. And if you know the history of Sudan, what we see today as the big blown out war have been built gradually, systematically by this kind of smaller disputes, conflicts that we have seen over time. So we are talking about who else is doing protection. Of course, we appreciate the fact that at the continental level, the regional level, there are conversations on protection. But there are also people that we recognize and work with, refer to them as the community protection groups that are doing prevention work. They are what we refer to as the peace and reconciliation committees at local levels. I will make reference to some of the conversations we have. We talk about also women protection teams. We talk about youth protection teams. We talk about even early warning and early response teams. These are usually the first line of response. The first responders are usually called upon to mediate or to intervene when a conflict is brewing. Ambassador talked about institutional framework and systems that we have, the EWA system. We talk about also the Council of Elders or the Wise. I would also say that at the local levels, we have these structures and systems in place that are already doing most of this work. And we talk about early warning and early response. And I'll be more specific to some of the issues that are happening. 2025, the whole issue about El Fasher was everywhere. El Fasher was an impending disaster. It was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. But these groups that we talk about, these protection groups that we talk about, have been working not necessarily to stop the guns from firing, but their concern is how do we reduce the impact it will have on us. And so, early warning, early response, they were able to identify, okay, there are triggers, local indicators that we see to show that things are going to get bad. And by mid-April or so, there was already conversations and mass relocation of people from El Fasher out to other places, to Tawila and other areas. This is early warning in place, knowing that this is going to happen. We may not stop the guns from firing, but we can prevent the impact it will have. And there was mass relocation. While El Fasher was a disaster, I think that this greatly reduced what we have seen. Even in the those of us that know Zamzam and Abu Shok camps, when artilleries were flying and everywhere, these groups could not stop it, but they had to dig trenches. We have women and young people their head in households, dig trenches and say, once we see this coming, we go into the trenches or the foxholes that we have, because this is what we can do within our spaces. And this is great. We're looking at also similar to what we talk about the Council of Wise. When we talk about the peace and reconciliation committees at the local level, these are respected elders. These are community leaders. These could be religious leaders that sit and they understand that there are local conflicts around grazing areas. There are conflicts between tribes that have resulted into deaths and all of that. And what they do is to, one, support track one intervention by mediating local ceasefires at their levels. Now, this looks like ordinary, but you see, that in a full-blown war that we have in Sudan, this little conflict and prevention efforts that are happening every day on the ground contributes to the bigger picture that we have. Because again, we can't be managing a bigger war and also community level conflict and violence that happen. And so this prevention work key into this. The question we ask is, how can we link this to continental, regional prevention initiatives? They are not necessarily working in silos, and I think that this will need to be complementary. And first and foremost, I say that we speak here to, one, spotlight the presence, the efforts, and the capacity of these groups. They are not just victims, they are not sitting ducks, they are not just recipients of aid or protection services. They are also active participants in prevention of conflict and violence. They work in difficult environments, in places that are inaccessible, across crossfires, and so our conversation is how do we bridge this or bring it to the track one conversation. First, we need to recognize that there are efforts on the ground, similar to what may be happening at the continental level or the regional level, similar structures, similar platform, but maybe at a localized level that contribute significantly. First and foremost, acknowledging this is one important step in saying, okay, while we design all of these efforts, we need to know that there are people that are also contributing in reducing or preventing violence from happening. This is one. Then secondly, we talk about also resourcing this group. And this is what MP does on the ground. We are not reinventing the structures or these systems. We identify, and what we do is to accompany them, to support, to resource them through capacity, through logistics, through trainings, for them to be able to continue this prevention work that is already happening on ground. This is one of the key things that we do. Then I would add that lastly, they should be treated as also partners in prevention and not just as mere recipients of prevention efforts or initiatives. We acknowledge that there is a gap, but in all of these steps, in recognizing, in resourcing, in also working collaboratively, keying also the continental early warning system to local early warning systems and structures will be key, because sometimes I dare to say that what we see at the continental level as early warning has already begun as a full-blown conflict, violence that have resulted in mass casualty on the ground. And so we may need to link these systems together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that, I think, stark reminder of communities are not waiting for peace. They are not doing this out of their own goodwill. They're doing this to survive, because there's an absence of the institutional mechanisms to protect, and there's an absence of the state to protect in many of these cases. And I want to turn it back, before I go over to Mahalet, back to the ambassador, to get his thoughts and perspectives on how is from the SADC perspective, are the mechanisms connecting to communities? They able to, and maybe if you can think of some of the examples you referred to, the interventions in Madagascar and DRC, how are some of the more communities or civil society actors engaged with when thinking about some of these response mechanisms?
Thank you so much for giving me back the floor. Actually, I was taking some very interesting notes following what you were saying, and I was lying in my head. I was connecting it to what we are doing, and the question came. So I'll start by saying that we are working on what we call a mechanism to interact with non-state actors. This is broad. It can be observer countries, it can be CSOs, it can be anything. Our member states are working on it right now. We already had not conferences, but workshops regarding this. So, but as at now, I understand that our early warning center, the regional one, is tied up to the national early warning. And I understand that the information communicated comes from the ground level, from those CSOs, civil societies. Example in Madagascar, for example, what is happening right now, SADC is adamant. We have received the refoundation plan from the government in power, and we said we are supporting, but it must be an inclusive dialogue, inclusive of everyone, whether it's religion, whether it's women, whether it's youth. So we are waiting. And we are monitoring, actually we are monitoring as well, to see that everyone is on board to have their concerns listened to. But of course, the government has to take action on these ones. So this is Madagascar, for example. In Mozambique, I remember, thanks to the European Union, when we had deployed the SADC forces in Mozambique, we were doing women empowerment on the ground in Capo Delgado, in Pemba. And EU assisted us with workshops to capacitate the women, because we understood that, to avoid T and VE, you better have the women network, which is very powerful, to be informed so that they can go home and teach their kids. On the DRC, what we are doing is that we have put in place SADC and EAC have come together. We have put in place 5 facilitators. You must have heard about that. Each one has a specific mandate. And if I'm not wrong, 2 or 3 have the mandates of dealing with CSOs on the ground, whether it's women empowerment. And they are doing it because on my side, I'm in touch with women groups in Goma, and they're sending me WhatsApp informing me, hey, I met with the former president Saleh Worke, and this is what we are doing. So I see there's interaction happening. And next week, we are again going to have the roadmap and make sure that these interactions, we won't be able to list them. It's dangerous, but at least we know it's happening on the ground. So this is more or less what SADC's approach and importance. But with the NSA's document, we'll go above our interaction with the SADC Council of NGOs. We'll go above this one. Yeah, I hope the question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador. I think that great concrete examples as well. And I'm very conscious that on the panel, we've spoken about continental, regional, and communities, and we haven't necessarily addressed the national. And the fact is that as you said, the regional early warning centers connect to the national centers, which draw from the community level. We did have a speaker who unfortunately fell ill, who could have reflected a bit on how through the Women, Peace and Security agenda, there have been connections to the national action plans. So this is an area to explore further to make sure that all the levels are speaking to one another when we talk about early warning indicators, for example. But before we sort of wrap up and probe our audience more for some reflections on what's been shared, I want to turn to Ms. Mahalet Hagos from the perspective of an organization that is outside to the African Union, but very close to the African Union, perhaps a helpful friend that can hold them accountable to the commitments made at the extraordinary summit, but also one that has a lot of experience on conflict prevention, mediation on the continent, to share a bit more from your perspective and from the perspective of policy institutions. Why is the AU falling so short in terms of conflict prevention? And this crisis of leadership, of political will, of financing that we've heard so much about, how do we truly get to the core of addressing these issues? So over to you, Mahalet.
Thank you very much, Leslie. First, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Accord for inviting us to be part of this conversation. For those of you who don't know, Accord is a civil society organization based in South Africa, Durban, who has been working in conflict resolution since 1992. And we are very much pleased to be part of this conversation. So to start addressing your question, why has the AU been underperforming in conflict prevention and resolution? And I think the biggest part is AU is as strong as the political harmony of its member states. And the conflict prevention mechanism architecture is designed on the idea that parties will come to the dialogue, will come to the table before a conflict erupts. But however, we have seen that that's not the case. And member states are very reluctant to use conflict prevention measures offered by the AU, such as the early warning system. And we just need to also understand why why the member states are not open to this early warning mechanisms and conflict prevention mechanisms. And despite the AU having various peace and security legal instruments, such as political and economical measures, still the member states are unwilling or reluctant to put those measures in act. And this gives the AU very little leverage to ensure that the parties come to the table, they come to the dialogue. So this shows there's a bit of disconnect between the prevention mechanism, which is premised on the idea that parties will come to dialogue, and the AU having little leverage to pull parties come to the table. So I think one of the measures the AU can do or take is to ensure that they utilize some of the PSC's legal frameworks and to obtain some sort of leverage to ensure parties come to the dialogue and to the table. And second, today's conflicts are evolving, and it includes more than identifiable state actors, as it has been shared previously by different colleagues. And those non-state actors, such as armed groups, militias, and others working in conflict prevention, they are not part of this continental prevention architecture. And for example, we can take the conflict in Sudan, we can take the Tigray conflict in Ethiopia. The non-state actors, the women groups, and other non-state actors like traditional authorities and faith leaders, they are left out in the negotiation and mediation efforts taken by the AU. So these non-state actors also need to be part of this continental prevention mechanism to ensure AU performs well in the conflict prevention and resolution aspect. And connecting to that, because African Union's prevention and resolution of why it is underperforming, and the obvious answer always that comes up is political will, lack of political will. And how do we create political will and leadership within the AU? I think first we need to understand why are governments avoiding conflict prevention mechanisms? Is it because it threatens their political system? Does it threaten their regime? Why are member states afraid and are reluctant to take on the conflict prevention measure? And we need to understand the why. And we need to understand the why to reframe political will in a sense that how do we present conflict prevention tools as something that is politically valuable to governments and to member states. And we need to present conflict prevention not only something that will ensure the security, but also as a governance issue. That is important for governments to ensure even their regime stability, and as well as to ensure they attain their development goals. So we need to reframe political will as something that is politically valuable tool to create the incentive within governments to use conflict prevention methods. Another point would be to have a stronger peer review among member states, and that could start with the upcoming summit, and hopefully the member states come out with measurable goals, obtainable strategies and objectives, and to ensure there are reporting on the prevention actions that are being taken by each member states. And third, as my colleague has previously said, not only do we need to include community voices within the conflict prevention architecture, but we need to institutionalize communities and the work they are doing within the continental prevention mechanism. And that's the only way we can ensure that by making sure their work that is being done at the community level is visible at the continental level, also to create political will at the continental level within the AU and as well as with the member states. So we need to institutionalize community voices and community actions that are being implemented at the local level. And that takes me to your final question on financing, which is the big question of the last 2 years for us working in NGOs and civil society organizations. How do we close the gap? And that's a very important question, because understanding that the African Union heavily relies on external partners' assistance, and at the time where there's a funding constraint, that dependence and reliance on external partners has a risk of presenting so many issues we're also observing right now. So the dependence on external partners can create the issue of sustainability in the work the AU is doing, and as well as autonomy and the ownership of the work the AU is performing right now. And I think we can identify 3 actors in the financing of the peace and security work. That is the member states, donors and funding and external partners, and as well as the local community. So the member states should ensure they sustain domestic financing, preventive diplomacy. Donors should also make sure there is a balance between their conflict resolution and conflict prevention initiatives. Donors should not wait, or external partners should not wait until a conflict arises and there's a humanitarian emergency somewhere. So there needs to be a balance between the funding that is received between conflict prevention and conflict resolution initiatives. And at last, financing mechanisms should reach local communities. And that has been said previously, because funding usually goes to international organizations, national organizations, national actors, or sometimes even regional civil society organization, but rarely does community-led actors receive direct funding support. So we need to ensure that direct funding support is reached to various community-led actors. And that also brings the responsibility for all of us here to ensure that community-based actors are fully capacitated in management of grants, in applying of grants as well. So I think tying all of this within the financing aspect, I also believe personally that the AU needs to identify and be very strategic on what it funds. With the little amount of funding we have in the past 2 years, and foreseeing what will be in the next years as well, AU needs to choose what it should fund. And just to finalize, prevention is not the responsibility of the AU alone. And I think the member states, regional actors, continental actors such as the AU, external partners, and as well as the communities themselves need to work harmoniously to ensure we implement the conflict prevention mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahalet. I think some very concrete recommendations there, especially in regards to the financing aspect. And a point that I really want to reiterate that I think is really core to a lot of what the importance and centrality of conflict prevention is that when we are responding and when we are intervening, we really need to dive into the root causes early on. We can't wait for processes such as trust building, relationship building to happen after the conflict. It's not a linear approach. We have to be working to address and rebuild trust at the same time as trying to bring political solutions. So it all works together. I have many questions that I want to ask my panelists, but I'm conscious that I'm not the only one here, I'm sure, with many questions, and that you have all taken time out of your schedules to join us here today. So I want to pause at this point and turn it over to the audience in the room and those online to see if there are any questions or comments, reactions that they have for the panel that they want to dive into and probe on deeper. And then we can turn it back to our experts up on the stage to respond to some of those. So perhaps we can do maybe 3 or 4 different questions. And then we'll give our chance to our panelists to respond, and hopefully we can do a few rounds. So I open it to the floor and see if there's anything that anyone wishes to share. And I trust that there's someone who could let us know if there's anything from the online audience as well.
Okay, thank you, moderators and the presenters. You have given us a wonderful insight on this prevention of conflicts in African context. My question will be basically for the SADC representative. I mean, His Excellency Ambassador Jevin. Basically, you have mentioned about the panel of elders in SADC regions. So what's basically the role of these elders, or is it advisory opinion, or whether their decision making is binding or not? That's one. And the other question will be for any of you from the panel. And I can see that there is overlapping or duplication of peace prevention efforts among member states and the RECs. So how can we harmonize such duplication of peace building or conflict resolution efforts among member states and regional economic communities? Thank you.
Okay, we have one question from online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dimitri, please go ahead, unmute yourself and present your question, please.
I just wanted to ask you about the cooperation with ECAS, SEAC, the SEAC Commission, because we heard the gentleman, the ambassador of SADC, but also for the Central African region. I wanted to know, talking about cooperation with bodies that are there for regional economic integration, but that also have a very important stake in conflict prevention, early warning. I'm interested in know what can you tell about that and the cooperation on the ground.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. May I read? I have one more. Okay. As stipulated on the Charter, AU has a right to intervene if a member state has issues of war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. What is AU doing to ensure respect for human life, condemning terrorism, and rejecting impunity? This is a question from Gani, our online participant. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to our colleagues online and our colleague in the room for those interesting questions. I'm not going to rehash the questions, and I'm not going to dictate which of my panelists must answer, but just give an opportunity for each of them to come in and respond in any way they wish to, or to address the point that was perhaps made earlier by a panelist that they wish to react to. I think let me start here with Lieutenant Colonel, whether you feel that there's any points you wish to bring in, or perhaps want to even address one of the, I think, themes that came up earlier around how will the commitments made in this extraordinary summit how will member states be held to the commitments that they make, and how will the commitments that are made be further communicated out? So just something perhaps you wish to reflect on, or any of the other comments made.
Thank you again for giving me the floor. I sincerely hope that the summit can bring a new perspective for our continent. First, maybe strengthening the AU warning system, as already raised by my colleagues. That Africa needs that system to be reinforced. That needs to be capable to detect tensions and acting before the escalate into violence. So I think this is a must for us. The second, I can say that we need to reinforce preventive diplomacy as well. We need to reinforce the dialogue. We need to move on with the mechanism that put all parts in conversation to avoid the escalation of conflict. Dialogue, mediation is also needs to be put in place. Political engagement should be as well in place. Third, we need at least we need to recalibrate the conflict prevention framework for our continent. I think doing that we can move fast to avoid conflict escalation as well. We have tools. My colleague from Accord says that those tools they don't help us to achieve the goals, and we need to rethink how we can do better to avoid conflict escalation. Fourth, we need to strengthen the role of peace and the Security Council. We have seen a lot of communiques, a lot of decisions from the Assembly, but the conflict prevention, the conflict solution has been a challenge for our continent, and we need to address better that. We need to empower the Security Council. Every member states need at least to follow the decision. They need to engage more with decision, because the problem that we face is the implementation of the decision of Peace and the Security Council. We need to change that thing. Also, we have to coordinate better. Instead of duplicating efforts, we need to find a solution for each problem. Duplication of efforts is a thing that doesn't help that much the continent, and the results are that we have seen over the years. We need also to reinforce the partnership with UN and other organizations to address well the ways to solve the problems that the continent is facing. We need as well to coordinate better with RECs and MRs, make regional mechanisms. We have examples for that. We have been talking about African standby force, but when conflict erupts, it takes long to act, and people on the ground are suffering, are being killed, and we still having meetings to discuss over again, and the problem take long to be solved. Africa needs also to look the ways how to finance their peace funds. We need to address well We have seen this issue related to UN Security Council Resolution 2719. We're still discussing over 2-3 years, and the implementation is never put in place. Instead of waiting, why member states still looking for that resolution instead of looking for other options that maybe will be very helpful for our continent? Looking to the summit itself, I think that the summit must reaffirm Africans' commitment to sustainable peace and African ownership. I believe this needs to be addressed, and our bosses need to take this in account. It means that we need to accelerate the implementation of the master roadmap to end to silence the gun by 2030. We need to address the governance deficit. We need to look at as well for UCGs, terrorism, violent extremism, illicit financial flows, everything that comes around the conflicts, which is very bad, we need to address properly just to avoid this situation over and over again. So I believe that the Luanda summit will definitely mark an historic shift from norms to implementing solutions. I think this is the goal of this summit, from reacting to crisis to preventing them, and from fragmented efforts to a current integrated continental approach. I believe when we get there to the summit, I think we're gonna see things that I mentioned before happen on the communique or the declaration. I thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel, and I'm glad you brought those points forward on what the core approaches to the summit will be. And I really would encourage that we all collectively think about how, as those perhaps observing the summit, can try and really reinforce this accountability to implement the decisions that are taken. I want to pass it now over to Ambassador. There were some questions directed at you on the sort of what is the role of the elders, specifically their decision-making efforts, as well as looking at sort of how we have more complementarity, how we engage more in a coherent sort of manner with the different mechanisms. So let me pass it to you.
Thank you very much. I'll start by replying, and then if you allow me, I'll just give some proposals like my colleague, very good proposals. Actually, they're a bit similar to what I did. To the colleague on the panel of elders of SADC. You cannot have a decision body because SADC or African Union are sovereign member states, as you know, so they can only be guided by what the findings are on the ground. So in the example, for SADC, for example, recently, we had the SADC Troika. So, as mentioned, the SADC organ on politics defense cooperation. So this is how it works. We have 3 member states on the Troika who they look after this. Right now it's Malawi, the chair. The next one is Eswatini. Tanzania was the previous one. So it's subdivided into the organ Troika summit. The 3 of them take decisions, but when it comes to financial or decisions which regard everyone, then it's the General Summit, the organ summit. Last week I had the Ministerial Committee of the organ. This is where ministers meet and discuss. So 2 weeks back, if I'm not wrong, we had the SADC Troika Summit where Excellency Joyce Banda who has been nominated from the SADC panel of elders to lead our efforts on Madagascar, came and gave a beautiful report based on her 4 missions done in Madagascar. So all the heads of states were there, they listened to it, and then we called upon the member states in question to come and depone. So the member states come, talk, speaks, we take note. When they move out, this is where all the, if it's the Troika, they discuss, and then we come out with proper recommendations. It's not of, this is why we have our panel of elders led by former heads of states. In DC, we have 5 facilitators, they are former heads of states. They have this political leverage, but they have also this knowledge. So we cannot just bypass their findings. This is our relations with our panel of elders who guide us on every aspect of things. They are deployed following decisions of our ministers and heads of states. And when they come back, they give us the findings and we take decisions based on this. On harmonizing efforts, your second question. I did touch upon one principle a bit earlier. I mentioned complementarity when I just wanted to overfly everything. But remember, the EU and the RECs are guided by 3 principles, a bit the EU and the UN. Subsidiarity, complementarity, comparative advantages. This is how we live our collaboration with the African Union. So harmonizing efforts would be, of course, with the division of labor document that I spoke about, that would be the best case scenario. But as at now, we are still working through these 3 principles. So, for example, let me take the example of Madagascar, for example, again, because these are the recent crises. I won't go on Mozambique. In Madagascar, SADC decided that it's not a coup, but we have to support the member states, and we are going to do a field visit on the ground. Subsidiarity. It's true that as per the protocol creating the PSC, they are supposed to be the continental one having full access. But these are problems that we still have to work out. Complementarity, I would talk about Mozambique. When we deployed in Mozambique, we needed the assistance of the African Union, and they came after some time through equipment donation from the AUCLB in Douala. That's complementarity. In the case of SADC, we don't have comparative advantages as at now. I hope not. This would be entail that the REC is not functioning or has issues, then EU has the obligation of stepping in. So that's one example of harmonizing efforts and avoiding duplication of efforts. My last example would be what we are doing right now. We started with the quadripartite summit. I did mention that on DRC, where ECAS was present. I'm going to come to the question from the colleague online about ECAS. ECAS was present. ICGLR created under UN resolutions. It's a non-recognized REM, but we work with it a lot. It was ECAS, UN, MONUSCO, SADC, and EAC. That was the initial idea of us coming together under one umbrella, the African Union. We were supposed to do the 2 processes, merging them, the Nairobi one led by EAC and the Luanda one led by ICGLR under the chair of Angola. So that was one. Now it gave way to the IGS I mentioned before. Again, the RECs and the EU are working together to harmonize efforts on the ground to avoid duplication. We can have a bilateral UN mediator to discuss about this. Coming to the ECAS one, it's true. We have had meetings with the SG of ECAS, who's from Burundi, who really wants ECAS to come back to assist with the Eastern DRC process. SADC, EAC is already on board, AU is on board, ICGLR is on board, and now we are counting on the Togo mediator, who's the AU mediator. We had a meeting in Lomé, I think, so many meetings, 3 weeks back, where he did a mid-year assessment of what is happening on this matter, and they brought ECAS on board. So we are waiting to see what will happen if ECAS will be the 3rd REC to be part of this joint effort in finding solutions in DRC. The last one again on ECAS, to respond to the colleague, we have set up an inter-REC platform. It's been 2-3 years. It's not a competition we realized that if you look at the Abuja Treaty of 1991, which talk about the African Economic Community, there are stages that have not yet been implemented. Why reinvent the wheel? Go back to this document. It's a spirit of collaboration. And us, Rex, we said, let's discuss, let's share information about what we are doing. One example would be the Uni Visa that the EAC has put in place, and we are having it in SADC. It's like the Schengen Visa. We are learning from NOC about deployment. ECAS and ECOWAS are working together on maritime security. So this is what we are doing. SADC is the chair of the Interreg platform. We'll be having our meetings very soon. We have chosen 4 items where we discuss experience sharing on mediation, by the way, which I will love to share with you how we are approaching mediation in each REC. So ECAS is there. ECAS is coming back. And as a REC, we support RECs. If you allow me just quickly, thank you very much. The colleague spoke about the EU-UN partnership, Resolution 2719. At one point in time, we saw SAMI DRC under one of the proposals to go to UN, then it disappeared. So other RECs have been discussing RECs-led support operations endorsed by the African Union should be part of this. It's been long-time discussions, but we hope to see one is any REC-led support operations mandated should be part of it to get the assessed contribution. Reviewing of the, no, I mean, we've been discussing UCG a lot. We just had a big high-level meeting on UCG recently. I believe we should review the LUME, the CRT, we should review the definitions of UCGs based on what we are doing. It's 26 years down the line. It's not the same UCGs military. We have to adapt. So I believe that we need to review and come up. I think it has been done, but it's not implemented. So on my proposals, quickly, I would say division of labor to be reinforced and implemented in the light of what is happening right now on several sectors. Whether it's trade, cross-border trade and everything, but here we are for peace and security. Accept that the RECs are the first responders for localized crisis and that the EU should automatically support. It's not the REC which has to go to the African Union and say we need support. EU must be the umbrella watching, the guard, the watchdog. If there's a problem, EU watches, liaise regularly, coordination with the RECs, similar organs. What are you doing? What we can do? It's not the case right now. Right now, in the case of SADC, we go, and then we have to wait for the African Union to come and say, can we help you? After like 6-7 months, we shouldn't see that. Should be more coordination, more emphasis on the AGA, the governance architecture, the AGDEC, how to maximize on low-cost preventive diplomacy, how to do capacity building with our member states for ratification of the AGDEC, and that's it. On early warning standard procedures, like the RECs have their own. I spoke to you about the regional early warning, continental early warning. The information should go to the AUPSC, and we need to have a proper summit. We should give the power to the AUPSC on specific things whereby they can take action right away, which would mean the deployment of the panel of the WISE in collaboration with the panel of elders of SADC or the panel of elders of COMESA, depending upon the region. Resource mobilization, big issue. It's in the 2020 protocol on the relation between the RECs and EU. We are still waiting to see what will happen, but Division of Labor document clearly mentioned what is the role of the EU on resource mobilization. Monitoring and evaluation, I believe it's something missing here on SADC side. We have a proper monitoring and evaluation system where we take, even Secretariat is taken to task about decisions taken by member states and where have we reached, why we haven't reached there, what is the problem. I've been taken to task. So member states, of course. And then to my colleague from ACCOD, we work a lot with ACCOD. They help SADC a lot. I would say empower the African peer review mechanism. Ever since I'm a pro-APRM governance, they have interactions with the AUPSC. But if you read the country review reports, there are plenty of things that show that something is going to go wrong in a country. So peer review, They know it. It's in internal information given to the AUPSC, which take action. We have 15 members representing all the regions. They should be a bit more empowered, and they should have more consultative meetings with all the RECs, not the regions, the RECs. Like we are going to have one in September. ECOWAS had its third one last month. Other RECs are not having it. So I would really push for such consultative mechanisms to be in place where we regularly inform the AUPSC and inform the RECs as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to give my two colleagues to my right a chance also to come in again. And whilst no perhaps direct questions came about, I want to abuse my role as a facilitator and see, Chris, when we talk about we need to include civil society and communities in these mechanisms, what does it really mean? How do we really want to institutionalize processes that bring civil society into continental and regional structures? Or what is our recommendation concretely around that?
All right, thank you very much. This has actually been the call, basically how to bridge track 1 and track 3 engagement. Because again, like I say, we are seeing similar engagements at different levels. And of course, what some people may have said, it's not necessarily duplication, it's collaboration and probably multiplicity of different efforts. However, I know that Ambassador talked about also a mechanism that would include also civil society, but we need to also see this just beyond conversations and a commitment to this. The fact still remains that at the community level where we work, a lot is being done at the continental and regional level, but not known, seen, or heard at the community level. This is where the civil society organizations will bridge the gap. I'm sure when we talk about even strengthening early warning and early response framework systems and structures, this is where we have the civil society bridge the gap to be able to, one, amplify those processes, systems, and voices from the ground upwards. This is key to the conversation. And I think that we need to also have spaces that welcome and include civil society into this kind of conversations. We talk about, I like the fact we talked about a monitoring and evaluation process and system. And this is also what the civil society can do in terms of accountability, in terms of reminding us that this is what we have committed to do. This is what we have said to do, and probably the time frame, the different indicators of successes. This is where the civil society will come in. Of course, we have different level of expertise. I understand also there are conversations around political will, but clear success of these processes would necessarily practically have to include civil society organizations to bridge the gap, because all the conversations we're talking about is how we bring all of the protection actors together, track 1, track 3, community level, and this is a core role that civil society can play. And key to this is also, they can also serve as a bridge for resourcing and funding community level protection prevention initiatives that are happening on ground. Because of course, the AU may not be able, the AU cannot reach everywhere. They can't be everywhere. The frameworks can't be everywhere. We can't have your ambassador be everywhere on the ground. This is the role that the CSO can also play in bridging the gap, in serving as the legwork, the foot that we would need on ground to be able to amplify and to do this work greatly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And Mahalet, to you, there was a question that was looking at the sort of AU's right to intervene and when it is able to step in and under different circumstances, and to try and understand a bit more to what degree the AU uses this tool as a conflict prevention mechanism. Perhaps that's something you could react on, as well as perhaps some, I guess, action or last thoughts you would wish to leave with the group.
Thank you, Leslie. I think we have tried to answer this question in different ways previously as well. Why does the AU why does not the AU intervene in conflicts around the continent? While it has the right to intervene, there's also the sovereignty question, as the ambassador implied previously. The AU usually doesn't respond unless they are being asked to respond, and usually that's the case. And even if it wants to implement the legal frameworks it has, and as I have said before, there is the lack of political consensus among the member states to enable the AU to react to these conflicts across the continent. So I think I mentioned this before as well in the previous part, that there needs to be a political harmony between the member states to enable the AU to work and intervene in this conflict. And I think the question and the topic around conflict for prevention is very much important in this aspect, because it's difficult to intervene on the conflict in a conflict that already arisen, but it's much easier to do conflict prevention across the continent, and it becomes less of a sovereignty issue if we do conflict prevention instead of intervening after the conflict arises. So I say that it's difficult for the AU because of the sovereignty question to intervene in this conflict, and can't also implement the legal frameworks because they can't. AU member states also usually do not vote against another member state for AU to intervene. But however, the AU should utilize its political legitimacy to ensure that member states and as well as other actors, non-state actors, come and to the table and create a platform to convene in this case. And as a last word, I think, as we have mentioned in different forms now in this panel, conflict prevention is key to ensure that conflict transforms in the continent. With the lack of AU's power to intervene in conflicts. And I think AU should focus most of its funds and its ability in conflict prevention across the continent to ensure that, and also with the funding constraint as well, to ensure that its funds are properly utilized and hopefully transform the continent into more of a peaceful society. Thanks.
Thanks, Mahalet. I am conscious that we have committed to end at 4:30. We did start a bit late. I see some hands being raised, but I wonder if we take a round of questions or we rather encourage that we discuss bilaterally after the discussion today. I would like to be respectful of people's time. So I ask my co-hosts what they suggest. Okay, so we'll take 2 or 3 more questions, and then as a response mechanism from my panel, I will give them 2 minutes to respond, as well as share some closing points, so we can wrap up and leave enough time for people to chat further bilaterally during the networking discussion afterwards. So, sure, please choose.
Thank you so much to the organizers, and I promise to be quick. I just wanted to touch on 2 things that I didn't think were addressed. One is the role of youth in contributing to peace and security. As you know, they're one of the most impacted populations, but are also equally capable of contributing to decision-making in peace and security. So as Ambassador mentioned, the member states are working on mechanisms to include non-state actors, and hopefully those include youth that can represent both the urban and rural realities. And my second point, also more of a question, is that I think Lieutenant Colonel had said, let's rethink about how we address peace and security. But in doing so, how can we help communities maintain resilience? So we know that they are engaging in activity, but how do we ensure that they maintain resilience? And related to this, what is required for a more rigorous approach to addressing harmful practices and norms, which are often at the heart of conflicts? Thank you.
Yes, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for all the panelists for such a wonderful panel. So my question goes to Mr. Chris and Ms. Malet. What programs have you offered for the African youths so far to strengthen the peace-building process across African nations? Thank you.
Great. Perhaps the lady there behind you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question goes to the His Excellency Ambassador Permanent Representative of SADC. As someone who was working at with the MONUSCO in DRC, I'm very much interested in knowing the success of SAMI DRC and also the mediation effort of SADC in DRC. Do you think that it was successful, both activities? And if it is successful, what makes that activity successful? And if it is not, what are the challenges? And how does this will shape the African-led peace activity, peacekeeping activities, and also mediation activities in the future? Thank you.
Great. I think we have two questions from this side of the room here.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't go in English. I don't know if I can speak in French.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
We do have translation. The headsets are on the table.
Ok, merci. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais commencer par saluer les panélistes.
Thank you very much. So I would like first to greet the panelists for their presentations. I'm Nicolas. I'm coming from the Benin Embassy. So we have seen all along the discussions that the African Union has established different mechanisms. It's rather comments than questions that I do have here when it comes to prevention activities that are operational. And we have different efforts. The main challenge is at the structural level. You have also mentioned it as well. It is the sovereignty of the states. The sovereignty for our states, it is very important that is protecting them. So we have seen different missions of ECOWAS that work in some countries. They wanted to for prevention, but we have that the Luanda summit will reaffirm the different engagements so that we can have a certain balance between the sovereignty of the state. Though when you have a crisis and there's a problem to intervene, we need to work at this level. And that point I want to raise, when it has been decided that the mission should intervene, we need to avoid all extension of mandate. So we need to get in and avoid to extend the mandate of the different stakeholders on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one more question from this, from the gentleman at the back. Then we'll turn to these last two, and I think we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you so much. My name is Previn, and my question is cross-cutting. Any of the panelists can answer, but it is more centric to African Union. Angola was the chair of the African Union previously, preceding Burundi, and the issue we're discussing today, conflict prevention, is something which is not ending. It's not a 5-year problem or a 2-year problem. It's continuous. So my question was specifically addressed to Angola, but any of the panelists can answer. Since Angola is, or rather President Lorenzo is the champion for, peace and reconciliation, is there a mechanism for transition to ensure that the projects or programs he developed when he was the chair are being carried on to the next chair of the union, so that there's a continuity and there's no fragmentation of peace efforts or rather conflict prevention efforts? Thank you so much.
Great. I think we'll take this lady with the red pants and then this gentleman.
Thank you so much. My name is Chantal Mutamuriza, and I am AU representative for Save the Children. I want to bring children on the table, obviously. And I want to start with some data. In Africa, 281 million children live in conflict zones. This is 32.5% of Africa's children. And the recent report of the UN Special Representative on Children in Armed Conflict shows a sharp increase of 20% of great crimes against children, and most of them are in Africa. And while the African Union has made great strides in terms of protection of children, first by adopting a number of child protection policies, and second by appointing the AU Special Envoy on Children in Armed Conflict, children are still left behind when we discuss issues of peace and security. So my question here, or my reflection, is as we discuss prevention, I would like to encourage us to place children at the center of this conversation. Childhood is a unique window of opportunity. When it's lost, children can never recover it again. In Sudan, we have 18 million children in humanitarian emergencies, 80 million out of school. I can go on and talk about DRC, South Sudan, and the list is long and we're not here to talk about only data, because behind the data, there are human beings and children. So, and children cannot wait for peace agreements. So how can we make sure that children are always at the center of the discussions when we talk about issues of peace and security? And my question is, are children issues, in especially protection and child-sensitive prevention, is it going to be on the agenda of Angola Summit? If not, why? And if yes, how can we influence the deliberations and the outcome of these deliberations? Because children issues are matters of peace and security. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think the last question to the gentleman here.
Thank you very much, our moderator, and also thanks to our presenters. Yes, maybe also my questions are going to be cross-cutting. As really clearly articulated by DA Angola, that the extraordinary summit in Angola centers on shifting the African Union from a reactive body to a proactive peacekeeping force. Now, the question would be, being the first one, why do continental early warning systems fail to trigger timely response? That is the first question. Second one, how can the African Union establish a robust, unified stance to limit the external influence in African internal conflicts and thereby protecting the regional sovereignty? The last one being concerning with the funding and the sustainable financing. how can African Union influence its strategic partnership with the UN to secure sustainable, assessed contributions for African-led peace support operations? Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all those extremely rich questions. I'm going to turn it to my panelists in reverse order and ask them to answer the questions they feel they wish to answer, as well as any sort of last reflections, but to do so in a concise manner, noting that we can continue the conversation after the panel as well. So Mahalet, over to you first.
I will start with a question on what Accord organization, civil society organization offers to youth to include them in peace and security. And I would say, to be very concise, as Accord works with at the continental level, regional level, and as well as local level. At the continental level, we work closely with the AU. For example, in providing initiatives such as training, for example, the wise use in preventive diplomacy, 24, and as well as other activities with RECs such as IGA, TADAC, ICAS, and other regional organizations. At the local level, I just want to mention locally in Ethiopia, we had provided capacity building initiative to the Ethiopian Youth Council, and as well as and have been working closely with the Ethiopian Youth Council and the Ethiopian Ministry of Women and Social Affairs to ensure, to support the YPS, Youth Peace and Security National Action Plan process in Ethiopia. Just to touch on one more question, and why early warning systems are not producing timely information. This is just my opinion. I think while this is also a very important question, the timely information also might not be the biggest issue. It's the utilization of what we do with the information that we receive from the early warning system. How that is utilized in the member states, and how the member states actually receive the early warning systems, and if they implement it or not. And those are my reflections.
Thank you. Chris, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. It's just a pity that some of these questions are coming at this time, and we will talk about them more. I think we'll have time to engage. But I will speak about my concern is what happens at the track 3 interventions and what is happening. Youth interventions. The youth is not left out in violent prevention. And when I talked about different community protection or prevention groups, where we work, we have also active youth protection teams made up of young boys and young girls that are actively identifying early warning triggers and are also proactively engaging different stakeholders to respond as quickly and as early as they can. And we can talk about this because it's a whole package that NP engages with at the community level. My sister, they talked about resilience, how to rethink peace and security at the continental level, but also how does this strengthen community resilience. I would like those that are thinking at that level to talk about, but I will tell you that this community protection or prevention structures or systems are not waiting, and they have over time evolved and have built resilience to all of these issues. And that's why you see that they are no longer passive, but active participants in prevention and in protection of their communities. I like the conversation about children, and unfortunately, we may not have been able to touch it more, but I will tell you that probably aside from what is happening at the continental level, community protection processes, prevention processes put children at the fore or the core of this. I will speak for a case in Tawila. When El Fasher fell, we had over 600 unaccompanied and separated children that left El Fasher as young as 2, some as 6 months, children carrying children that parents have died of on the road or anything. They came into Tawila. And what did these prevention structures do? They were able to identify all of these children based on traditional and cultural practice, also knowing that children are vulnerable, exposed to different levels of risks. And they took them into different homes that are tied to different communities and were able to, over time, support in local tracing and family reunification that we see as sophisticated, but at that level, they have systems and processes for doing that. And this was very effective. And we can talk more about this. But also, these groups have also been able to monitor the recruitment of children into armed groups, and they've been able to flag this to what we call the local council of wives to say you need to talk to actors to leave children out of this broader conflict and all. It may be at a little community level, but this has significant impact on it. And I think that this is I know there are lots to talk about, but we would engage more on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll follow what you said, Chris, because these are very, very interesting questions. And I'll just touch on it, but I'm available outside to have bilateral, especially with our colleague from MONUSCO. It's a very, 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 very long question. To our colleague on YPS, Youth, Peace and Security, we have a strategy in SADC, but we gave more priorities to the WPS, the Women, Peace and Security, Women in Peace and Security. Coming to the youth strategy, when we talk about the NSAs, when I spoke about the interactions, there are criteria that have been set to recognize which type of CSOs it is, in which field it is, what it's doing. It should be based in 3 or 4 or 5 member states of SADC. So based on that, we'll know which are those CSOs recognized by SADC, and then we'll work out with ECOSOC, and probably at one point in time, if they are on early warning, they'll be there to provide information. But at this, I leave it to the technical experts in the Secretariat in Gaborone. But I'll be available to answer if something happens. MONUSCO, SAMI DRC, please know that 2717, after the resolution, as you know, SADC has started consultations with MONUSCO directly. And we have partnered together, as you know very well. If you have been MONUSCO with Bintu Keita, we have worked. And recently I met Mr. Swan as well, the new MONUSCO head, when we spoke. A lot of things to be discussed about that, whether it's a success or a failure or what is being done. But for you to know, on the Togo-led mediation, MONUSCO is part of the platform. We are discussing with MONUSCO because they're on the ground. We're also discussing with ICRC because they're on the ground. They are those actually helping the 5 facilitators to move around Goma or North Kivu or South Kivu or even the SADC team. So we'll talk on that. It's too long, the answer. Chantal, I heard your question. Pardon my lack of expertise on this, but for me, children are what we call protection of civilians. And there's a lot of interactions happening between the Peace Support Operations Department and the SADC Standby Force or our planning element. So this is something very important to us. So I would tend to believe that when we speak about POC, children are involved, women and youth. And there's a lot of work happening, but I won't be able to give you a lot. We also have a post-conflict reconstruction development policy. AU has done it. SADC is going to have one. It's going to be implementable. And of course, it also involves soldiers, recruitment of child soldiers and everything. Last one, why do you think the continental early warning system is a failure? I leave it to the African Union. Actually, I gave some few points about the national ones, the regional ones, but let our colleagues from the continental one advise what is happening. How to avoid external influence in African conflicts. Again, it's a member state sovereign thing. Okay. We are seeing it with the Washington Accord. We are seeing it with the Doha process. Just jumping in what we are doing right now on the Independent Joint Secretariat. But remember, decision of the AU SADC is an AU-led process. Every partner who wants to help should be behind. So I did have discussions with the ambassador of Qatar on this matter. I can't say anything here, but this is the thing happening right now. So we're having these processes, we are monitoring, and we are monitoring also what we are doing. It should be aligned. Sustainable financing, 2719, I did mention that at the level of EU, one of these days they will bring the REX EU-led operations, peace support operations under 2719. That's it. And then the Peace Fund, we have a third window right now, which is financing the DRC peace process, which is mediation. And we are hoping to go above the how do you call that? When you put your money in bank, they give you money. So we are going to, I hope, above the 400 million. But this is in the expectative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now, Lieutenant Colonel, over to you. Several questions addressed on the summit, but also to you for the last word for our session today.
Thank you again. I just want to start with Burundi presidency. If we recall last year, while Angola was chairing the AU, President Lourenço named the president of Togo to deal with DRC conflict as a mediator, I think. And it means that now Burundi leading the AU, the president Togo head of state needs to work with Burundi chairperson of AU. So means that there is a continuity that the work that Angola has done until February this year. Also, in different levels, there has been consultations at level of ambassadors, ministerial level, and even with experts in different embassies between Angola and Burundi. So we're still working together in issues that they feel that needs a support from Angola. So regarding the issue of children's during the summit, when we've called that summit, doesn't mean that children are left out. When we call this summit, means that all Africans are included. Those instruments that we need to recalibrate. Children are in. No one is left out. Even youth, everyone is in there. So this is, if we want to talk specifically about children, we have to, we need to have a different meetings or to deal with this issue. We can bring as well the UN with resolutions that they have for children in armed conflicts and other issues. So everything needs to be put in place. So this summit is for Africa, for all Africans. It's not just for head of states. No. It's for everyone.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. I think that's an excellent point to end on, and that's what one of the driving points of this event today and this discussion was, to ensure we're gathering those voices, those perspectives that may not necessarily be in the room at the extraordinary summit, but need to be heard. And I really think that that's a call to hold more of these conversations in both the run-up and the follow-on from the summit, to make sure that we really are including all voices, and to ensure that African communities, African citizens are really driving forward the agenda of the continental mechanism. So I would like to stop here and ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists for today for the thought-provoking discussion, the excellent contributions, the concrete proposals, and join me in clapping and applauding them for their expertise. And I would like to call on Ms. Susanna Stroll-Rita, I'm definitely saying it wrong, the director of the FES-AU Cooperation Office, to provide some closing remarks for us today. So Susanna, over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much in participating in this very important discussions that we had ahead of the extraordinary summit on conflict prevention in Luanda. As usually, I won't be long, but I give you like a brief overview of what we have discussed. And I mean, you actually already had such a nice closing sentence, so it's a bit difficult for me. But I think it became very clear from the discussion that we stressed the importance of community and non-state actors for the summit and in general for conflict prevention and conflict resolutions. Also, the key role that RECs and regional mechanisms play in addition to national community ones and the continental ones. And we talked a lot about complementarity, subsidiarity, as well as financing. But when it comes to financing, we actually want to see more commitment of African Union member states, not external financing alone from donors and so on, not this dependency. And it was also mentioned in the introductory remark by our colleague from Amani. And I found one idea very interesting, which was not so much discussed, but which Mahelet brought up, to hold member states and maybe even African Union more accountable. We could introduce this kind of peer review system, or maybe African Union conflict prevention, conflict resolution review system, which is somehow lacking currently. And I hope that the summit will also discuss about such a mechanism and maybe introduce clear categories, clear points, and clear points on which we can measure then the success of African Union, so that member states become more committed to action and not just to talking and to discussion. I'm also well aware, and I'm sorry for that the panel was somehow lacking the African Union own perspective. We had a representative and we tried to get other representatives of African Union. Let me put it this way. I hope they are so busy with preparations for the extraordinary summit that they simply couldn't make it to our very important panel today. But let me also announce that this will not be the only panel that we have. We will have one after the summit, where we want to discuss again about what was missing maybe during the summit, where were the gaps, what was not addressed. And I hope that after the summit, at least, we will have African Union representation then in the discussions. And yeah, let me also close by saying it was several times stressed that this is a unique opportunity. The summit in Angola, we have very high expectations to the summit. I hope that this unique opportunity will not be spoiled. I hope it will not fail. And I wish the representative of Angola and all actors who are sitting here very good luck for the discussions in Angola. And let me also close by saying thank you to this excellent panel, excellent moderation, excellent contributions from the participants. I wish you all a very nice evening, and I hope we can continue the discussions outside. Also mentioning that we had excellent translation and interpreters that helped to facilitate the discussion with the French-speaking participants. And of course, the FES team. Excellent partners that we had from the Nonviolent Peaceforce, from Amani, Africa. And in addition, we have a networking cocktail outside. So food is the most important thing that I forgot. Please join us for the food outside and for the discussion in a more informal way. Thank you so much for this evening.